Institute of Learning, and this is Mr. Swakambo to take you through the New Testament. But today our focus is going to be in this area. We're going to look at the end of the oral method of spreading the good news and the beginning of the written gospel. Time came and the oral method of preaching collapsed, and now people started to focus on the written gospel. The apostles began to write together and then compile the message into writings. Reason being, there are a number of factors that pushed them to write the gospel down and ignore the oral method of preaching. After revising a number of challenges and after getting some writing materials, after getting the general language which can they use that could bring people together, and after them aging and they saw themselves losing the memory, we shall see a number of factors that pushed them to sit down and write the gospel. So the apostles of Jesus Christ depended on the oral preaching of the good news for a very long period of time. They used this method of oral preaching for quite some time because of different factors. However, with the time, they had to sit down, and now they ignore the oral method. Then they had to embrace the new method of preaching, and that is the written gospel. So they said that, however, at times, as time went by, they also started writing the gospel down. So we want to see why was the gospel written. We want to give an account for the oral proclamation of the gospel. Why was the gospel compiled, and why did the apostles take long to think about writing the gospel? Why did the written gospel delay? However much they faced persecution, but they still used the oral method. We want to see a number of reasons to why this happened. So we said that many factors and circumstances influenced the early church to delay in writing the gospel and instead preached orally for a long period of time. The following are the factors that hindered the writing of the gospel. We are going to see what made the apostles delay. Why didn't they think about writing the gospel in the first place? Why did they take long to write the gospel down? So the expectation of the Croatia also was one of the factors that delayed them from writing the gospel. I remember in the past videos I say the Croatia, this refers to the second coming of Jesus. So thinking about the return of their masters made them to sit down and use the oral method. They believed that Jesus is coming, or Jesus is going to come back soon, so there was no need of writing the gospel down. So this made them to delay in the composition of the gospel. Still, they also delayed to write the gospel due to the fact that it was time consuming. So writing the gospel down, it was time consuming. It could take them long time to compose the gospel, to compile, to gather the message. So it delayed them from writing the gospel. It was time consuming. And still, the influence of poverty also hindered the preaching of the gospel. Poverty was yet another factor for the delay of the composition of the gospel. They didn't have enough facilitation. They did not have enough money to finance the process. Remember, they had to buy the writing materials, for example, ink. They had to buy, let me call them papers, where they could write. So it was a wrong process that needed a lot. For example, finance, time, and many others. So the influence of poverty, that's how it delayed them from composing the gospel. High levels of illiteracy also delayed the writing of the gospel during the early church period. When we talk about high levels of illiteracy, this is when we talk about the view that the people of the time, they did not have, let me say, that knowledge. They did not know how to read and write altogether, and they were the biggest population. They did not have education. They were ignorant. They could not even read and interpret. So this delayed the process. Both the believers and unbelievers, they did not know how to read and write. So this was something that the apostles looked at, and they said, now, if we write the gospel down, who will interpret for them? Who is going to help them in reading? So let us just use the oral method, which they can all listen to and understand. Then there was the intensive persecution, which delayed the writing of the gospel. The apostles were always on move. They were always in hidings. They were always running up and down. So they did not have time to focus on preaching. They were always hiding away from the persecutors. So they did not have that ample time of sitting down and they think about what to write. They don't have that time of sitting down and they think of what should they leave. So this delayed the process of writing the gospel, and they focused on the oral method because they were always hiding and they wanted to use that time also to preach. So persecution delayed. The apostles also still had what we call strong and sharp memory. They could still remember what happened. Are we together? So they did not see any value in writing the gospel, since they could still remember what went on and what happened. So they were still trusting their heads. They were still trusting their heads. So they saw no need of sitting down and writing the gospel for the believers. So the memories that they still had about Jesus made them to think that it will last. But as time went by, they started to lose their memories, and therefore, in order for them to leave the message for the future generation, the apostles sat down and wrote the gospel. Jesus' commission for the disciples to go and spread the gospel to all the parts of the world also made them to delay in writing. When Jesus was ascending into heaven, he left them with a task. He told them, preach, expand the church, and therefore the apostles had to sit down and they had to move in order to fulfill the task left to them by their master of expanding the church, of preaching the gospel to the far areas. This made them to delay in their writing of the gospel. Then apostles critically had some few scriptures of the Old Testament to refer to those few scriptures together with the fresh message they had about Jesus Christ. So they had little references. They had a few things they could refer to. So they saw that if we write the gospel down, we don't have enough references. Therefore, we could they are afraid of getting challenging questions from the new converts from the new converts. So they were afraid of getting such critical, hard questions from the new converts. So they wanted to use their mouth, because they knew when we use our mouth, we can defend the gospel. Still, preaching orally was the tradition of the time. So by that time, using the mouth, it was the culture, it was the tradition. So people could easily embrace this method than written gospel. For example, even in the modern world today, if you write the gospel down, people have Bibles in their houses, but they don't read. But they listen to radios, they watch TV. That means oral method is better to the majority, because some people at times they are busy, but they can use their ears to listen. But at times it becomes hard for them to read the gospel, since it is time consuming and therefore it ends up making it unnecessary. So the apostles say now, if we write the gospel down, our people are used to what we call the oral method of preaching. They will not welcome the method. So let us continue preaching the gospel using our mouth, door to door, and so on and so forth. Another one, the Holy Spirit had not yet inspired, had not yet guided the apostles to write the gospel. So they were still waiting for the Holy Spirit promised to them by Jesus to come and guide them on what to write, how to write, when to write. Therefore, this delayed the writing of the gospel. There was a belief that the eyewitnesses by then, they were the last generation. This was because they were expecting the second coming of Christ and the whole world would come to an end. So for them, they believe that when Jesus comes back, the entire world is going to end. That was the destination. They believed that that was the end of life. They believed that they were the last generation. So they saw no need of writing the gospel since they were the last generation of the time. Another one, the apostles were copying Jesus' example. Jesus, during his time, he did not write the gospel down. He was using the oral method, mouth, door to door. So they were copying his life. So they also wanted to be like him. They had, there existed what we call some conflicts, disunity and misunderstandings in the church. And so they could not come together and write the gospel. Even the apostles themselves, they had conflicts within them. So this made the process of preaching very complicated, since they could not sit on the same table and then filter the message that was to be written. They lacked specific languages to use in writing the gospel. They did not know which language should we use, what should we look at. So they were just there. They don't have that common language that could bring people together. Orally, so originally, writing was only authorized to special groups of people called the scribes, who were not interested in writing about Christianity. So the scribes were not interested in writing the gospel about Christianity, and yet they are the only authorized people. They are the only people allowed to write things down. So they're like, we shall not write for you the gospel. So the apostles saw this was a challenging part at the apostles. They did not have writing material. By then they did not have writing materials. Things that they could use in writing the gospel, they were not there. So this was a challenging part on the side of the early church apostles. I beg to submit from here. Have a good day.